بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Welcome to episode 2 of the series Diary of an Islamic School Principal. In this episode I want to talk about the clear impact that Islamic education has on kids. Now in the previous episode I mentioned how some parents realize the need for Islamic education, for Islamic schools, for their kids. How some parents realize that early on from the get-go. Some parents realize that in the middle, kind of after something happens, and it's a wake-up call and they bring their kids and to enroll them in Islamic school. And then how some parents only realize when it's too late. I want to give an example of a family that came a few years back and enrolled in our school. And I won't share details or any identifying information, but I'll share with you the story overall while keeping the people anonymous. This family had multiple kids, but came and enrolled their oldest daughter in high school and another daughter in elementary, about mid-elementary, and one was just starting off in high school. Now, the older daughter in high school, obviously, is something happened that triggered, that was a wake-up call for her parents, and her dad brought her to enroll her here. And since he's enrolling the older one, he enrolled the younger one as well. And you see the contrast, the difference. The older one, subhanAllah, by the time she got to high school, you can tell the negative influence from her peers, from the music she listens to, from just the whole ideology that she had. Her whole mindset has been corrupted. And as educators, it's felt like we're fighting an uphill battle. We're trying to empty out what she has filled in her mind all over the years, the negative things that she has filled into her mind, the things that conflict with our beliefs as Muslims, and just general really values and manners. And it's like trying to empty out what has been filled into her mind all these years and trying to fill in, before you could even fill in the good things, the things that you actually want her to acquire. So it's much easier if you have a blank piece of paper and you're filling it, but if you get a filled piece of paper, you have to erase everything and then fill things in. Or if you get an empty bucket, it's easy to fill it in with water, but if you get a bucket filled with dirty water, you have to empty that out, clean the bucket, and then fill out water. Otherwise, it's going to be very hard to have any positive influence on that really young adult at that age. And so contrast that to her younger sister, who just after a few months of being here, because she's still young, she hasn't been as influenced by a lot of the negative things around out in some of the public schools or just in general in society. And so just after a few months in being a student here, the father expressed to us how happy he is with how his daughter is changed and how she's becoming better. She wasn't a bad kid, but how much better she has become. And even at home she started praying on her own. Elementary student, you're talking about an 8-9-year-old starting to pray at home, starting to wear hijab, on her own, wanting to wear hijab. So all these things, the positive influence, the impact is clear. And it shows the importance of the earlier the better, the easier it is to actually achieve those goals that we're trying with the students. The earlier the younger they are, before they've been influenced negatively by other factors. And ironically enough, there's another issue I'm going to touch upon in this episode, which is this family also had 2 sons. Now, one of the sons was still very young. He was a baby, so he wasn't school age, but they had a son who was in middle school. So in between the oldest daughter, who was in high school, and the second daughter, who was in elementary, they had a son. Their oldest son was in middle school. They didn't enroll him along with his two other sisters here. They didn't bring him along, and they kept him in public school. And unfortunately, that inconsistency, that trend we see is very clear with some families, not all families, but unfortunately with some families we see how they bring their daughters to Islamic schools, but not their sons. They think somehow that their sons are immune from everything else negative out there, so they're not worried about their sons. It's really a double standard that, unfortunately, if anything, I would worry more about the boys than the girls, because for many reasons. For one, I mean, the girls automatically, if they wear hijab, they stand out. For the boys, they usually are able to blend in a lot easier, and so they're more influenced. Then there's other factors. Again, we don't want to generalize, but both boys and girls equally could be negatively influenced, and both equally need Islamic education. And this sets up a problem for the future when you have girls going through Islamic schools, or a lot more girls going through Islamic schools. Especially, you notice it as the older grades. In the younger grades, they're equal. Sometimes even you might have more boys than girls. It's pretty random. But as they get older in upper elementary and middle school, you notice a clear trend, and then definitely in high school. We see, from our own school and from a lot of other Islamic schools throughout the country, how, and a lot of, again, not always, but in many cases, how the number of girls are a lot more, again, especially in the older grades, in middle and high school, a lot more girls than boys. And, it's unfortunate, because these girls that are going through Islamic schools, when they graduate and they're older, from within the community, the boys, who you need boys that, or young men who have gone through Islamic education as well, who, have a firm foundation, a strong foundation in their deen, strong Muslim identity, know their deen, so they're able to marry, and that's how you form strong families. But if you have, if you don't have that, then our girls are going to struggle when they're older to find someone good to marry, or they're going to end up marrying, not to generalize, because not everyone who goes to Islamic school is automatically good, or grows out to be a good Muslim, or successful in the goals that we have set for them, or that their parents have set for them, what they have set for themselves. And not everyone who goes to public schools automatically turns out to be corrupt or bad. But we're talking about the general trends, the influence. Again, the impact is clear, But again, this points out to the inconsistency, how sometimes families think that their boys are immune, or just how their boys, they're worried about their boys. Well, they have to, to pursue a career, so they have to place more focus on their academics. Which, again, that's a whole nother topic for a different episode, of that perception of academics. So we won't get into that, the perception of academics between public school, private school, etc., and Islamic school. But the point is that, whether it's they think their boys are immune, or whether they place them in public schools because they perceive the education to be better, and the academics to be better, and they're worried about them being able to pursue a career and support a family. Regardless, the point is, this inconsistency, this double standard, isn't really good for for our boys, for our men, as they grow. And unfortunately, in that case, the father, after 6 months or so, took the kids out of school. Transportation, there's different factors, but transportation was one issue. But so yes, it's not easy. It's not easy. It takes sacrifice. People sometimes look at it and say, well, there's free, public school's free, the bus comes picks up my child, I don't have to worry about anything. Whereas Islamic school, I have to pay tuition, I have to drive them every day and pick them up and drop them off. And yes, it takes sacrifice. It takes investment in our children. Just if you want to if you want them to develop if you want them to grow a certain way, if you want certain goals to be achieved, if you want to raise your kids a certain way, you have to invest in them. This stuff doesn't happen on its own. You have to invest. You have to nurture and develop and sacrifice. You have to sacrifice in order to get the end result that you wish to achieve. And so to wrap this episode up, the impact of Islamic education is clear, and we see it we saw in just a few months with the younger child in this case, and sometimes with older kids as well. But also, going back to the need, people need to realize the need early on, because otherwise, in this case, realizing the need later, one daughter, they've practically lost the ability to influence and to help develop and nurture and raise the way they had wanted, whereas the other one, alhamdulillah, at least they're able to have some impact on that, at least for a short period of time, but at least it planted something and does help. So it's definitely an investment, and it definitely pays off, especially in the long term. Barakallahu feekum, jazakumullah khaira, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.